Okay, my friends, this is another episode of Remodelers on the Rise live. And I know you guys prefer it when I have a guest, and I have a guest today. His name is David Lupberger. I've always said it like that. Is that how you pronounce your last name as well?
You nailed it. Yeah, trust me.
Lupberger. Not
Growing up, I had Lupberger, cheeseburger, Limburger. You nailed it.
Loop. It's Lupberger.
Lupberger.
What is the origin of that name? Is it what nationality behind it, or what's the story behind it?
Nationality, German. So my
Okay.
great grandfather came actually over from Germany. So I'm like fifth generation, fourth generation. So German. So we know how to focus and work. All right. It seems to be transferred from generation to generation. We don't
Okay.
always laugh, but we work hard.
Have you ever had Nifflies?
Never.
Have you ever had Spetzel?
No.
Really? Okay.
No.
I think a lot of people call it Spetzel. I have some German in me, and like my grandparents were Bretternitz was their name, but my dad makes a German dinner once a year.
Oh,
People,
interesting.
hang on,
Okay.
people watching this live, we're going to get into exiting your business, the strategy behind that. We're going to teach, but first we're taking care of some other business. What Nifflies are, and if you guys want to put in the comments or whatnot, if you've ever had Nifflies, what Nifflies simply are is you take, we just did it recently, my wife wanted to make it. You take flour, you take a certain number of eggs, and you take water, and there's not a perfect science. My dad was like, well, you do this much flour, you get 4 to 5 eggs, and then you just add the water until it's the right consistency, one of those recipes. But then you get it in there, you take a knife, and you kind of go, and it drops into boiling water, and you're making your own kind of little chunky noodles.
Huh.
And you just keep making it,
Yeah,
and you keep making it, and then you take them out and you put them in a bucket. I mean, if you put butter on anything, it's delicious, but they're delicious.
Interesting.
So, well, there we go. Now we know a little bit about the origin. I nailed the spelling of your name, but let's get into the business side of things and what we're actually here to do. And I'm going to ask you this question. What are we going to talk about on the show today, David?
Contractors beginning to think about the time, however, in the future, that exiting your business. And I brought this up with some people and they said, I'm not exiting. And the long-term answer is, yes, you are. So let's really think about, even if it's 20 years away, what do I do to actually create a business where I can exit, and can I monetize what I've done? And the answer is yes, you can, because of the relationships, subcontractor, supplier relationships, past client database, loyal employees. I bring up in some groups when I used to do live presentations, and I'd say, what are you going to do? And they'd say, well, we're not going to do anything. It's not on the plan. But the reality is it should be part of everybody's plan, because this is a goal we can work toward.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about. Tell me a little bit more about why we're talking about this.
It's a great question.
More into that.
Yeah, great question.
By the way, David, you're an excellent guest, but the reason you're an excellent guest, I mean, you're complimenting me. That's my second question. You're complimenting me. You're speaking my language of compliments. Thank you. I thought it was an okay question. You thought it was a great question. Thank you, David.
That was a great question.
So why are we talking about this?
It's a little bit like a softball pitch, so I can really line up on this one. I used to regularly, pre-COVID, do association meetings, the trade shows. And I can tell you, and you will relate to this, when I'm sitting in front of a group, 30, 40, 50, 60 people, half the people in the room have either white hair or no hair. And, I'm one of them. And you suddenly realize there's a great deal of experience in this room. What happens, when they decide to close their doors? And so this led me, and I'm in a similar path. I'm in my mid-60s of, what is my next goal? What do I want to work on? And I really enjoy doing this because of the people I get to work with and what people can do with these very vital businesses.
There's a phrase that everybody's kind of heard before of the fail to plan, plan to fail. I don't know the origin of it. I'm sure there's an origin of it. And that can be applied to a lot of different areas of our life and our business. But when you think about this, how do I transition out of my business whether I am selling it, whether I'm closing it down. People are always interested in how could this live to the next owner. But boy, if you don't plan it out, plan to fail in that category, right? And
Yeah.
it takes, I think, one of the messages that you've already shared and that you're going to share more is it takes years to do this. It takes a lot of thought through the who, what, where, when, why.
Yeah.
So we're gonna dig into some practical things related to that. I just wanted to maybe a little bit more properly introduce you for the people that are listening to the podcast recording or watching live, etc. David has been I would say, a colleague for a number of years. I think it was only a few years after I started my business. I remember actually, I was kind of like, this guy's got his stuff together. He's kind of doing what I'm doing. Maybe he wouldn't want to talk. I'm just going to reach out to him. I remember having really just great conversations. You were very willing to chat and kind to chat. And the colleague turned into friend over the last few years. David is part of a construction. Oh, you agree with that? Yes.
I
Yes.
do.
Good. I do too. We're part of a mastermind group together with other coaches and consultants. So we've actually got to see each other in person and spend some days together. I just asked him because I was going to reference the fact that I've never seen the man wear shoes before. Because when we were down in Phoenix, when we were down in Florida for our couple-day mastermind, he just walks around barefoot. And I said, "You're doing the barefoot thing?" And he goes, "No, I'm wearing shoes and socks today."
Today I'm wearing shoes and socks. And I did mention to Kyle, it is winter. I'm in Colorado. So I do actually put them on, but in Florida or Arizona, no shoes. There's
There you
a no
go.
shoe rule. Yeah.
Okay. Now, David, we got a comment from LinkedIn as he's listening to this topic. He said, "Hey guys, want to buy my company?" Is that a yes or a no, David?
Well, should we talk about the process?
Yes, we should.
Because, it's a key question, and I'll speak with contractors and I'll ask them, would you buy your business? What do you think the answer usually is?
No.
No,
Yeah.
they wouldn't buy their own business. So when we talked about this planning process, in remodeling, we work with homeowners to take an abstract idea and to put a plan together, put it on paper, and then execute that plan. We're doing the same thing here, which is let's review 3 areas in this. One is, when might you leave? And it's very flexible, just like a building plan. Number 2, are the resources financially in place to leave? So where am I now? Compare that to where I want to leave. Is the financial foundation in place? And usually it's not. And then last is there a successor? So I'm going to say, let's come back then to step 1. And step 1 is really any good business owner. My long-term goal to any owner is removing yourself from day-to-day operations. And it happens over time. It doesn't happen overnight. Years, 5, 7, 10 years, that you begin to empower certain people in the company to take over certain things. And what that does then, it gives you time. And right now, contractors don't have time. But somebody strategically has to look into the future and begin to say, I'd like to get there. What does that look like? And what are the steps to get there?
And creating that plan. I like how you described it again. Go through the 3 again. Number 1 is?
Number 1 is, when might I leave?
Okay.
And it's just like, when do I want to go on vacation? But this is a longer term vacation.
Yeah. And then number 2?
So, number 2 is the financial foundation in place for me to leave? And we call that the asset gap. What do I have now? What do I need? You don't want to live on less. So the whole point is, what am I building so the asset base is there? And then the third is probably the key one, is who's the successor? And in-house, honestly, the best way to do this is, can I work with somebody in-house to grow my successor over time?
Good. So as those of you watching live, if you have some questions on this topic, please type them in and we'll answer them. So you've started in your, you do coaching and consulting. You've been doing that for years. You were a design build remodeler before getting into that. But over the last bit of time, you've started to put more focus and more energy and more structure around this topic. Tell me a little bit more about why this area is kind of firing you up.
I'm my own client, which is in my age and beginning to see that I know I'm not going to work forever. So what does this ideal future look like? Well, if I don't plan it, and you just said it, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. What does that ideal future look like? And I began really investigating how I could work with my own business with coaching and consulting. And in all honesty, once New York opens up, my wife and I are going to live for a month or two in New York City just to experience the urban lifestyle. Next winter, we're going to be spending a month or two on the North Shore of Kauai because we can. All right. So as I got into this, I'd be speaking with contractors on the consulting side. And I'd start to bring up with them because in many cases, I know their age. And again, we're in a comparable, territory here. And I'd ask them, what are your plans? And I kept hearing again and again, they don't have a plan. And so I began engaging, well, let's really begin to look into this. And suddenly I see there's really a market for creating a process where people can over time. It doesn't happen overnight. We're talking minimum 3 to 5 years. Realistically, let's say 5 to 8, where you actually take a plan. And you're building the mansion on the hill. So it takes a longer term plan to put the process together. But it's like they don't even know the questions. So I really am getting into now personal one-on-one conversations with contractors of not only what are you doing now and what's successful, but what is that passion that you've put on hold? What would you like to do more of? And in all honesty, I've discovered that none of the people I'm working with now, none of them want to quit entirely because they're good at what they do. But they would like to be out of day-to-day operations. And they would love to have, retirement means working 20 hours a week, not 40 or 45. And having somebody who deals with the day-to-day responsibilities. And suddenly they creatively can really bring mentorship, can bring that age and experience to a new owner, to revitalize, to even open new markets because they have time. So creatively creating that outlet where you can do what you do best.
This is Peter. Peter wrote this. If you go to StreamYard.com/Facebook, you can do approval where we can see your pretty face on here. But Peter said, great hat, because this is the hat he sent me the other day. Saw David speak at the NARI event a while back and got some great pointers then. Looking forward to hearing more on this topic. It was fun when we used to get to travel and speak in front of people, wasn't it?
Yeah. I miss the event. I don't miss the travel, I have to say.
That is true.
Airports are not very sexy.
That's fair enough. Somebody's calling, by the way.
We're going to ignore them.
Okay, we're going to ignore them. So yeah. I should have just ignored it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Bailey, if you're watching this, just edit that part out on the recording. Let's get into the remove themselves from daily operations, because I don't care if you're 30 years old running your business, 40, 50, if you're years and years away, this concept of how can we remove ourselves from daily operations is valuable. I think what's interesting about this topic is even if you don't know what that's going to look like at the end, even if you're years and years away, following the steps to allow you to even have the ability to do it is still smart business, right? Yeah. So to remove ourselves from the daily operations, where do you see some of those important steps, and what are some things that people need to lean into related to that?
Great question again. You're just giving me these wonderful softballs right down the middle, fastball that I can hit.
You're welcome. So
I love to take an owner and we put together a current company organizational chart. And I've got a template. And in every company, there's like 13 or 14 primary function in any construction company. These are the functions that take place. And in this initial chart, I get to see what people are responsible for. And I get to see their name in 4, 5, 6, 7 different functions, roles in the company. My first question is, man, do you love doing all those things? What do you think the answer is? It's a very, diplomatic no. So I'm saying, well, let's begin to delegate those things you don't do well, because once we delegate those things, and literally within the first 90 days, I can usually save people 10 to 15 hours a week. And if they get that 10 to 15 hours a week, begin exploring what can they do, and right off the bat, they can usually increase income literally $250,000 to $500,000 a year. Guess what? Does that pay for that person to come in to assist them Does it pay for that outsourced help? The answer is yes. Yes.
And when you
yes.
say increase income because they're freeing themselves up to market, to build relationships, to follow up stronger in the sales
Yes.
process, yeah.
And
To watch production tighter and get rid of slippage, estimate better, job costing, all those things.
simply the term working on the business.
Yeah.
Most are so busy working in, they got their head down. If I can save you 2 days a week, let's begin looking at what you can do at that time.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
You go ahead.
We start with 2 days, but it can grow. And the reality is once people see how the process works, now functionally we can say a true business owner really strategically works on the business. Only one person can do that. And everyone in the company, including your clients, want that owner to think out 6, 12 months into the future. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Can we better serve our clients? How can we serve those clients? Do we want to add a new service element? And suddenly your company sees this forward thinking, and they're the beneficiaries. So it's a win-win of an owner being able to work on the business and work with good people, giving them a pathway because it protects them financially, protects you financially, and you're building a transferable asset.
Cool. So the question of how do we go about this exit strategy? You said, there's 3 parts. The first step, we've got to pull the owner out of the daily operations. And I think that's a very practical, one of the ways that you go about that was a very practical idea that everyone can grab and do this afternoon, do this weekend, do next week, which is create that org chart of each of the different positions. Well, Kyle, I'm not going to put in here, a position that's just estimator because I do that. No, put that in there. And like you said, look at how your name is next to 7 different things. And now we can see a lot clearer, maybe the lowest hanging one that we might be able to say, okay, that can be my next hire. But it brings some clarity to that. So I think that's a very helpful thing. Nancy said, Mark and I are both watching today. So they're longtime clients of mine, but here's an interesting couple, arguably the greatest remodelers in the entire country with Ben Carr Building Systems. Hopefully they're smiling or they're blushing. They might be blushing. But they are in a position where they've got a son who's been in the business for a number of years, and it's lining up really nicely for him to step into the business and take it over. And they're thinking about that. And he's just starting to get involved in the estimating, and he's been in production for a while. It's one of those yes, it's just like one of the perfect setups. So I'm glad they're watching and learning there. Okay, good. So going on to that second part, which was related to kind of the financial piece. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, this is where, a financial planner might get involved. And at some point in time, you and your partner may sit down and saying, we're not going to work forever. And so you look at what your financial assets are. And then, working with a financial planner, you say, when we retire or when we work less, we need this much per month. And you begin projecting out what that income should be. And then a financial planner can say, this is where you're at now. This is where you want to be. You need to make X amount more over the next 5, 7, 10 years. So suddenly you have a goal. And then if you looked at your business, you can begin to say, well, it looks like we need to increase revenue, $200,000 a year. Well, now I've got a very practical step. And so now I've got a goal that if I have time working on the business, now we can introduce certain, I call them value drivers. A client for life model where you have an annual home evaluation. There's a recurring revenue benefit. Another one that I really like is introducing your company to local architects and designers. They desperately need someone who can produce their work. You can do this. It takes time. They can't hire you till they trust you. But when you have the opportunity to see, gosh, I do need to increase revenue. How do I want to do this? How can I spend my time to introduce those revenue drivers to start reaching those financial plateaus, those milestones that we've identified? So your financial planner will begin to assist you with saying, where are you now? Where do you want to be?
And that clarity allows for a much clearer plan. Next thing I want to go to, and again, if anybody's got questions, ask, but I want to touch on this concept of how this ties in with continuity planning, because I liked what you said there. And then the last or other main thing I want to hit on, 30 minutes goes fast, my friend. It does, doesn't it?
Wow.
Yes, it
Yes,
does.
it does.
And then the last main thing that I want to talk about is that last part of, yes, finding a successor. But I want you to share maybe some insight into, what you see as far as, how much is my business worth? What is the structure? I think everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to get there's a number out there, and then they just pay me that number and off I go. But so often there's, it's installment payments. There's a lot of different ways. So I'm curious to get your 2 cents on that. But first, this concept of continuity planning. We're talking about exiting as a remodeler and kind of the end of it. But there's also in this planning, this idea of continuity planning. If I'm a remodeler and I go out there and I get hit by a bus today, I'm not dead, but I'm sitting in the hospital for 4 weeks, 5 weeks trying to recuperate, and I'm not in the business. What happens?
That's it.
Share a little bit more about that.
So continuity planning is, we're talking about, the long range transition or exit plan. That's when it goes according to plan. Your question is, what happens when it doesn't go according to plan? If there's a family accident or illness. And continuity planning should be part of every business, where you understand as an owner, if you could not come to work for 30, 60, 90 days, what happens? And creating literally written plan. I've got a copy on my website, but creating a written plan where people in the company know what they will be responsible for. There's compensation that's added to those additional responsibilities, but you're communicating this to the company, and people see this strategic highlight where other people, the employees in the company know that, gosh, Kyle's really thinking about this. And suddenly they see that if you weren't there, that their financial future is still maintained, that you've got a plan where if any one person, and once you do it with yourself, you can do it with other key people, which is, if that person didn't show up, how do we divide, that division of labor? Who's responsible? How do we compensate? Then we're talking about life insurance and different, key man insurance, disability insurance. But this not only protects your family, but really protects the company in case of unforeseen circumstances that, guess what? They arise. It happens.
That's good. And it's one of those topics we all know that we need to spend some more time on. As you're talking, I'm going, man, if I did get hit by a bus tomorrow, all the financial numbers, all the logins, like all of that's just right here. We've got to think through this.
And so I can send you that, Kyle, because a simple continuity form, it addresses all that. What are the account numbers? What are the access codes? What's all those things? So because someone, a spouse, a business manager, they need access to this.
Yeah.
They need to know.
And if people are watching or listening, contractorexitstrategy.com.
Yes.
They can get their hands on that. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So the other topic that I wanted us to touch on is related to how much can I sell my business for? David, that's all fine. We're going to plan. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. How much money am I going to get for this business? What is this thing even worth? Talk to me about that third piece. Yes, the finding the successor and how we think about that. And also, how do we even value this? What does that look like?
So guess what? Remodeling companies are not highly in demand. All right. People look from the outside in, and even your clients can say, you have a very tough job. And it's unique because people who do remodeling, we are unique. All right. So the reality is, you're looking at a multiple of net earnings. There's something called EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And the reality is, you have a net
Wait,
income.
Is that a German word? Are you using German? I know
it's an accounting term.
Oh, okay.
EBITDA, E-D-E.
No, you nailed it. You nailed it.
EBID. Okay, you got the idea.
I just, for the people that have been watching the whole time, I thought I'd just give them a giggle by mentioning. So people at the start of this, if you're late, we were talking about NIFLYs and all kinds of things. But EBITDA, carry on, David.
So what you're going to get is a multiple of net earnings. And the reality is, if your company gets probably more than 3 times net earnings, that's really good. Not unusual. 2.5 times, maybe 3 times net earnings. So if you're looking at what you made as a net, and gosh, I made, $250,000, your company might sell then for 500 to 700,000. All right. And I'm going to circle back. You're saying, gosh, it's not worth $2 million. No, it's probably not. But just by putting this planning in place, you are looking at a financial opportunity to gain that $500,000 to add to your financial foundation.
Yeah.
So it's not a huge multiple, but at the same token, look, you've got an established database, reputation, past client interactions, established subcontractor and supplier relationships, loyal employees,
Trucks, tools, trail. Yeah.
trucks, tools. Don't let that just go
Yeah.
away.
And
You
I
built
think
this thing.
for a lot of the remodelers who, let's say you're at that $250,000 of net profit ish, EBITDA factors some different things in, but let's just say you look at that net income and it's at 250,000. A remodeler who's built their business, that means they're charging what they need to charge. Their production is solid. Their, gross profit is good. They've built a nice business. Oftentimes they're probably on some pretty solid financial footing. And yes, that additional, being able to sell it for 500 if that's always helpful. But even on top of that, I see so many remodelers who want to give an opportunity to the next generation, want to make sure that their employees are taken care of. There's so many other factors. Want just the challenge and the joy of seeing their business live on past their running of it. A lot of times as a remodeler, if you've been at it for a while, you've checked off a lot of boxes of success. You figured out how to do this and do this and do this. There's that box of, do you think I can keep this going without me being involved? Can I sell this business? What a unique, interesting challenge that can kind of get you fired up for that last decade.
You just mentioned something. I'm working with about a half dozen contractors now, and 4 out of the 5 don't need additional income because they planned. And it's just what you just said. They want to reward their present employees. They want to make sure that their past clients are taken care of. It's about legacy and understanding, and they're willing to stay on as a consultant to oversee their successor, to assist their successor. And guess what? How do you replace that 30 or 40 years of experience? And the reality is you don't. Man, somebody sitting like the couple you just mentioned, whose son's coming on board, to be able to hand this thing off and grow this into a second generation company. What a wonderful legacy.
Yeah. Now, hand it off / they still collect a nice little fat paycheck each month.
It depends how you set it up. Yes.
But Mark and Nancy are currently going, yeah. Oh, yeah. But that's part of it, right? It's that decision. That's where the planning comes in. Those are questions that need to be asked. Do we just assume, well, it's coming down to the next generation, we just hand it off to them? Well, part of the thought here is you're going to still continue to provide value and service to this business. You've got to factor in your whole retirement plan. And, there's a lot of I've seen it done where there's a pretty hefty price tag over the years that's paid by that next generation. I've seen it done where it's just handed off. There's a lot of different ways to slice it. I've seen it done where somebody's in the process of a 5-year buyout where they sold their business to a architect friend of theirs contact of theirs who really wanted to get into the build side. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. And there's a lot of questions to be thinking about and considering. See, I told you, Nancy's excited about that last part. So David, this is a topic and a passion that you're putting a lot of focused effort, attention to. You have some resources. If people wanted to hear more about how you can help them or talk more about this topic, what should they do?
If they go to contractorexitstrategy.com, there is an exit assessment. It takes about 20 minutes. And if they just go through and complete that exit assessment, there's a simple follow-up report, and I can do a simple review with them because it highlights what areas they need to put attention on. And it goes through the areas of revenue, operations, finance, and I'm forgetting the last one.
I saw as you were doing it, I'm like, uh-oh, he's going to forget.
Yeah.
At least you didn't say at the start. There's 4 areas that it goes through, and then you could have kidded.
I got to 3 of them, and so
and that 4th one. Go to contractorexitstrategy.com.
That's my little trailer. So go to the site,
and you'll
you can see all 4 areas, and it just highlights. And I got to tell you, when most people do this, because you haven't put attention on it, you begin to say, "Oh, that makes sense." The key one, continuity planning. Nobody has a continuity plan. And it's like, well, let's think about it. It's important.
Yeah, and we can do it. Jeff's been commenting a ton through LinkedIn, and I've been trying to keep up, but he does echo the plan for success or plan to fail. He also has been giving us an opportunity, David, to buy it. So he's down to the one last time. Do you have any interest? Do you want to buy my company? 250K is peanuts. I'm passing, Jeff, mostly because I'm just not a remodeler and et cetera. David, are you interested?
I'm not, and I had a similar offer from a company in the Bay Area, and the company was closing their doors in 30 days. And he just said, "Do you want it?" And for about 30 seconds, I looked at it and said, the foundation is here. I'm not moving to the Bay Area. Okay. So that was a fairly simple resolution.
Right. Your son's in New York City. It would be the
I'm in Colorado. I like it here.
Although the Bay Area could be a good jumping off point for your little abode in Hawaii that you guys are going to check out for a couple of months.
I got to tell you, it's too crowded and it's a tad expensive in the Bay Area.
Just a little. Just a little. Good.
Yeah.
So this is a topic that, I'm constantly creating content around the sales process and marketing and numbers and financials. This is a topic that I don't get into too often, but it's one that's on a lot of people's minds. So I'm glad we were able to do this today. It was very practical. It's getting people thinking about some of these definitely on the business picture. Let's make sure, even amongst the hustle and bustle of our day in and day out, week in and week out, let's make sure we're thinking, down the road of where are we driving at here? So I think you did a wonderful job of helping walk us through that, and we provided some value, which is the goal.
Thank you for the invite. Thanks for sharing some time.
Awesome. All right, everybody. I will see you again next Tuesday. You'll probably see David again on here sometime as well. And you can check out his website at contractorexitstrategy.com. See you all soon.